Survival is not just about staying alive. It's about finding hope, healing, and strength. This is The Survivor's Voice. I'm your host, Angie Sedore. Before we begin, this episode may contain discussions of trauma, abuse, or other sensitive topics. Listener discretion is advised. We don't recommend listening to this show with young children present, and we encourage you to prioritize your well-being. Today on The Survivor's Voice,
a lot of my childhood was very foggy. Up until probably 22 years old, I had pretty much brain fog that whole time. It's hard because I think when you're raised in a certain way, we're all raised very biased and closed-minded in a sense because we only know what we know. And that's why I think I was so scared to be imperfect. And that's why it caused me so much stress.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on The Survivor's Voice. We're super excited about our guest today, Kara, and I'm really looking forward to getting into her story. So let's just get right into it.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So right away, I just first of all want to know, what do you do right now? Like, what do you do for a living? What's your day-to-day life look like before we kind of dive into your past?
Yeah. So right now I work in tech. And I've been doing it for about a year now. I got a master's degree in information security, kind of a change of a career path.
And on top of psychology?
So yeah, my undergraduate was in psychology. I worked in the mental health care field for several years and I loved it. And one day I decided to move states. So I quit all my jobs. I had like 3 different jobs.
Oh my gosh.
And decided to move and kind of restart. And I took a month and I was like, I'm going to figure out exactly what I want to do. Like, what is my true passion? What could I do for a long period of time? And I love the field of mental health care, but it is a high burnout field. And I never wanted to get to the point of burnout because it brought me so much joy. And so I just did a lot of research, and my dad worked in tech, and it was great. Like, he got to work from home and he was very present in our life. And I was like, I want to do that. And so I did a lot of research and got my degree. Have my job. This is my first career job now. So I work for tech for a healthcare company. And I travel between Montana, North Idaho, and Eastern Washington for the most part for these facilities, just maintaining their tech, everything from networking to like fixing printer problems. And I'm the only girl on the team, probably for a reason.
That's amazing.
It's super fun. I've learned a lot, and it's been a very, very, very great job for me.
I love that.
Far, so.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Is there a bunch of nerdy boys?
Oh yeah.
They are probably so happy to see you.
They every time I walk into a building, they're like, "There's no way you're our tech person."
No.
I was like, I know, but my 1 year came up recently, and they made me this, like, I don't even know what they're called, but they have your name in the middle and then a bunch of words that represent you.
Yes.
And the biggest word besides my name was Barbie. So if that doesn't explain who I am, I don't know what else would.
I love that. That's so cool.
Yeah.
You look like you're 20. So it's like, how do you have all these degrees and like all this experience?
I will be 27 on the 27th of this month. It's my golden birthday. So yeah, I do have a little bit of a baby face. So
well, you've already done so much.
Thank you.
And so that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
That's really awesome.
There's a lot of reasons for that, which goes into my background a little bit of why. So.
Well, let's segue that in.
Yeah.
So tell me about your childhood, your upbringing.
A lot of my childhood was very foggy. Up until probably 22 years old, I had pretty much brain fog that whole time. And I remember always thinking, especially when I became like more conscious as like a teenager adult, I was like, why do I feel the way that I do? Like, I feel like I've had a perfect life. Yeah, I'm so sad. I'm so depressed. I'm so anxious. I didn't know that I was at the time.
Yeah.
And I would feel guilty for feeling that because I'm like, I'm not a victim. Like, I don't feel like, what is wrong with me? And it wasn't until my adult life that I've kind of figured it out, and some healing between my parents and I with like how we were raised. And I would say kind of one of the earliest memories I had that relates to the start of my trauma, where I realized I had trauma, was probably 5 years old. And I pulled out all my eyelashes one day. It was actually over the course of probably a little bit of time, but I remember one day being like, I have no eyelashes. And my mom—
that young?
Yeah, 5 years old. And my mom was like, why, like, she caught me in the act one time and she's like, why are you doing that? You need to stop doing that. And I was like, I don't know. Like, I'm just doing it. I remember like very vividly being in my guest room in my house with my brother, and I would just like pull on my hair, and my hair itself too. I started to do, and thank goodness I didn't have bald spots ever, but I was pulling hair. Eyelashes were the first to go, and they were 100% gone. So there's definitely pictures out there of me looking like a little boy with no eyelashes. So because it was a physical thing, my mom, it's very clear something's wrong.
Yeah.
And so my mom, you know, she saw this and intervened by putting me into like a child psychologist therapy session thing.
Yeah.
Which is great. I hated it because I didn't like talking to strangers. But essentially, this is an anxiety disorder, kind of an OCD disorder, which is anxiety, called trichotillomania, which is a long word.
I'm really impressed you were able to say that.
I know, me too.
Can you spell it?
I went to say it 10 times fast, actually. So, yeah. So trichotillomania is a hair or skin picking anxiety disorder.
Okay.
Usually it's hair first. I did have skin picking. Sometimes I still struggle with it in high school and later on when I started to have like acne and things like that. I think a lot of people skin pick too, just in general, but I think it was related to my trichotillomania. It also stands for, or TTM is the acronym, so I'll probably just say that. So
okay.
It's not as a mouthful. Yeah. So 5 years old, obviously very stressed out. Why is a 5-year-old pulling out her hair
and
kidding. Her eyelashes?
Yeah.
Clearly there's something wrong. Outside looking in, again, even as an adult, I'm like, I had a perfect life. We had the white picket fence. We had the land. My parents were involved. They put us into sports. Me and my brother were straight A students. We both graduated with our AAs in high school because we did Running Start, which you can do.
That's cool.
You know, all these, like, we were like bred for success.
Yeah.
But both him and I had major issues. Like, we were internally in so much warfare, and I don't even think we knew.
So earlier you said that you started to figure it out. How did you figure it out?
Yeah. So let's see. I think, you know, from the trichotillomania, and doing the therapy sessions when I was 5, because I was a bright kid and very conditioned, I related, you know, going to therapy sessions to my condition, which was the act of pulling. And so I was like, I have to stop so I don't have to go talk to a stranger. Like, that's where my 5-year-old brain, right?
Sure.
And so after that, the habit went away. Okay, she's better. Cool, therapy worked. So great. Still in the same situation. So instead of it manifesting in TTM, it manifested in very severe social anxiety. Like, I remember seeing a Grey's Anatomy episode one time where this girl had a condition where she was blushing all the time. Like, if a guy walked in the room, no matter what, blushing. And that was me. If someone spoke to me, blushing. So embarrassed. And I was like, I would sweat. My heart would race. Like, all of your symptoms of like, oh my gosh. So as someone who also has a desire to, who I really am inside, which is like be everyone's friend. I love everybody. I want to be involved. I would laugh at the funny kid in class and be like, I have jokes. Why can't I say it? All these things. At a certain age, you know, in school especially, I was like, okay, something's wrong. I need to fix this, but I don't want to tell my parents because we're supposed to be perfect. We'll go into that.
Was this like high school, mid school?
Probably like elementary.
Oh my gosh.
I was very socially aware because I was socially anxious.
Wow.
So I was very motivated to get better. And initially on the path of getting better, it was mimicking. Like, I would watch my peers, and this is why I was very socially aware for a very long time, and be like, okay, that they laughed at this person's jokes. That's funny. Cool. I'm going to make sure I remember that. Oh, this person has a lot of friends. Everyone went to their birthday and they're like this. So I'm going to be like that. So I was able to mimic my way, and it seemed like it was getting better. Towards like end of high school, college, I was able to function a lot better. But it wasn't until I got a job with my degree in psychology. Like, you go to psychology, they say, oh, psych majors, they just do it to figure themselves out. I think that might have been the case.
Oh,
and
my
I think it was subconscious for me. Because I remember like reading all these things. So maybe that was the beginning of me becoming aware that my problems were more severe than they actually, maybe I thought they were. Like, that I was just getting by because I was mimicking.
Yeah.
And there's so much to my social anxiety, but in terms of like the healing part, I think that was the beginning, was reading about trichotillomania. I was like, wow, okay, there's a lot more to this. Reading about chronic anxiety, reading about depression. And at that point, my chronic anxiety had triggered depression in college days, whatever. And being like, if I did go to therapy, if I did go see a psychiatrist, I would be medicated 1,000%. And for some reason in my gut, I knew, and I didn't know why. I had nothing against Western medicine. I was like, I don't think this is my path. And I think what's meant to be will be, and I will find healing, because it was constantly on my mind that I need to fix this. And my first method of coping was mimicking, I would say. But that's not a true healing modality.
Sure.
Yeah.
So did you find out what the root cause was?
So, yeah. So when I got my psych degree, I worked in kind of business for a bit. I had my own little business in freelance social media marketing, whatever. Just kind of landed in my lap. So I did that for a couple of years, but my true desire was I want to use my degree someday in the field of psych. With just a bachelor's, it can be hard to find opportunity because a lot of times you need at least a master's.
Yep.
And so that's, again, why I went back to school and changed my path, because I just didn't want to be stuck there. But I ended up getting offered an opportunity to manage a neurofeedback company. And so it was a family friend, and her story is crazy. She has had dissociative identity disorder, and essentially through years of counseling, she got to the point where her counselor was like, look, you have done as much therapy as you possibly can. You need more. And I'm going to recommend this specific device. It wasn't FDA approved at the time. There was only one of these devices. I lived in Western Washington, so in the Seattle area. And so it was like an hour and a half away. She's like, just try it. They say it takes 10 sessions to feel a difference.
A device?
A device, yeah. So neurofeedback. There's different types of neurofeedbacks out there.
Is this like EMDR type stuff?
Kind of the same idea a little. Like, yeah. Essentially, like, neurofeedback gives your brain, basically signals your brain to reorganize itself so that it can work at its best.
Yeah.
So we have these like built-in pathways that maybe are conditioned that work a certain way.
Yes.
And what this neurofeedback does is it basically like gives your brain new information so that it can go in different pathways, in better, healthier pathways.
Yes.
And so like the device that she went and used, and after 5 sessions, it cured her. So she bought the whole device from her family.
Way.
Started a business out of it. And so that's who I got. So she was opening a second office, and she's like, I know you have a background in psychology. I want you to run it and build a website, run the whole thing, explore it, whatever. And week 1, I was like, well, if I'm going to do this, I want to know your story. And so I got her whole story. It was so inspiring. And again, in the back of my mind, I was like, gosh, you've lived a way more traumatic life than me. And like these experiences that I'm like, I don't know how people go through it. Humans adapt, that's how. But yeah, I feel so miserable, and I felt guilty. Like, why do I have anxiety? Why am I depressed? Like, I feel like my life was perfect, right? Still not sure what was wrong with me.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Got her story, was very motivated by this device. So again, it essentially like, it was auditory signaling to reorganize your brain. So you would put these sensors on your head, and then it picks up your brain's electrical activity like 256 times a second. And then it knows what to do with that information. It's mathematically designed to understand what it means. And then every time, and this is like dumbing down, because I don't understand it unless I dumb it down. Every time it sees your brain going down a bad pathway, you hear subtle interruptions in music that you're listening to.
Oh my God.
And that's all it takes to bring your brain back to the present moment, to tell it to go, nope, come back here, stop going down this path, come here. And they call it brain training. So you do it over and over, and it's like working out your brain. It's training your brain over and over.
I want to do it.
Present. It is a biohacking wellness device that anyone can use. And it is amazing. So,
oh my God.
You know,
I've never heard of this before.
I know. Yeah, it's called the specific device that she had is called Neuroptimal. Again, there's lots of neurofeedback devices out there. This type of neurofeedback worked with the whole brain rather than specific parts, because your brain works together. Like, we are whole, right? Wow. So listening to her story, hearing that she found relief, hearing her family's testimonies, hearing her other clients' testimonies, I was like, I obviously have had some issues since I can remember at 5 years old. So might as well try. So every day after work, I would lock up the doors, and I would go into a treatment room, and I would hook myself up, and I would put my headphones on and listen to the music and all the interruptions and whatever. And then, I think I was 22 at this time. I one day like had like a really bad or not a panic attack, but an anxiety. I got hit with anxiety.
Yeah.
And then I realized, and this was about after 10 sessions of doing neurofeedback. And so several weeks, I was like, oh my gosh, I had relief for the past 4 days. And I didn't know until I got anxiety again. And I was like, I remember calling my mom. I was like, this is what relief feels like. This is what normal people feel like. I had no idea. So I got addicted to it. And so after about 20 sessions, I would say it cured my chronic anxiety. And I have never had chronic anxiety since. I get anxiety like normal people, but instead of going like this,
I'm freaking out right now.
You're stable. Yeah. I've never, and then again, watching my clients, now I have my own testimony. I'm like, this works, which is crazy because it's non-medicated. Anyone can use it. You don't need to be prescribed it. You know, it's a little expensive because it's out of pocket because this specific device isn't covered by insurance.
Of course not.
Right. Because it works.
Yeah.
Sorry. Such a different rabbit hole. So and again, watching people, and I got so motivated, and I told all my friends about it, and I would have people come in and change their lives. And,
Wow.
and even if it was, you know, they say it's long lasting results, and I would say, yes, that's true. Because again, I haven't experienced it, but there's so many different healing modalities that even if it makes you feel better enough to go out and do something positive, like if you're in a depression hole, you don't want to work out. You don't want to do something creative. You don't want to do stuff that will make you feel better. There's just a lack of motivation. So even if it gets you up to that point of like, wow, I feel good enough to go to the gym, moving your body is amazing for your mental health. So boom, now you've done two things that you're probably going to feel even twice as better because you just did two different things. So that was the feeling I got, was like, I feel relief. I need to try every single thing out there and see if it helps me. Because maybe I can feel even better than I feel right now. Like, yes, I feel relief from my anxiety. Again, I still haven't found out the root cause of what this all was at this time. I just found healing.
Gotcha.
In my brain.
Okay.
So then at the same time, other family friends that kind of knew the neurofeedback people owned TMS clinics. TMS stands for transcranial magnetic stimulation. And basically, it is an FDA-approved treatment for anxiety, depression, OCD right now. They're doing crazy studies that with autism, with dementia, like with different other brain disorders, they are finding a lot of success. And all it is basically sending magnetic pulses to the part of the brain associated with the condition. So this is going to be big words, and I have to dumb it for myself down, but there's a dorsal lateral cortex in our brain that has been found to be underactive in brains that are depressed. So the idea is if you activate this brain with these magnetic pulses, the depression will lift, and it is twice as effective as medication. And 2 out of 3 people respond. That one is not long lasting results. So if I were to pick, I'm glad I did the neurofeedback because it is long lasting, but I worked there. It's a $10,000 treatment. It is covered by insurance. If you've done all these medications,
like if you tried everything else,
if you've done a certain amount of therapy, then it's covered. You can pay out of pocket, but I would not pay out of pocket for that.
Yeah.
$10,000.
Yeah.
I got it for free. So again, something else that kind of landed in my lap that I was like, I would not have done this otherwise. Yet here I am. I think everything's, stepping stones and everything's meant to be.
You know what I love about your story so far is that when you are seeking something, and you were looking for relief, like there's something wrong. Mm-hmm. Doors just open up. Like things. I mean, you have it. It just frustrates me when there's people that are struggling with something, but they're not seeking for the answer because it's going to come to you if you keep looking for it. And so that is just like a testimony.
Yep. And you just have to, it's hard because I think when you're raised in a certain way, we're all raised very biased and closed-minded in a sense because we only know what we know. Because I didn't go the traditional, you go to a psychiatrist, you get your medication, whatever.
Yes.
And honestly, I read about neurofeedback, I read about TMS very, very, very minimally in my psychology degrees. Had I learned more about it and had it been more normalized in my education, I would have been like, oh my gosh, I should go try that first. But yet that's not the first thing. And so, maybe what you seek out is different than the mainstream, but that's a good thing. It's trying different things to find what works with you, and it's going to be different for everyone. This is what works for me and what worked for me, and why I'm so passionate about it, because I've also seen it work for I would, and maybe I'm exaggerating, like 99% of other people,
Wow.
at least to the point where they can move forward.
Yeah.
And I think it's a series of stepping stones, right? It's like some people feel like they can never be 100% healed. I do believe that. I think that it's just a lifelong journey. And so it's like, if you're always reaching towards getting better, then yeah, you can be 100% healed, but life's going to always throw a curveball.
That's
and
right.
so it's just figuring out how to manage it. So yeah, between neurofeedback, TMS, feeling amazing, feeling super excited about natural wellness. And this is kind of a newer area because my education didn't teach me a lot of it. I did all these other things. I did another impactful one, I would say, that helped me figure out the root of why this all happened and started the conversations with my family of where the trauma really originated, was this thing called the emotion code. And this, a psychologist developed it. It is basically the idea, and there's a whole book on it. There's a book, it's on Amazon. It's pretty good.
I think I've heard of it.
Okay, it's interesting.
Yeah.
And sometimes this one I'm like, maybe it is a little more placebo, but it worked for me. It at least brought up memories that I could deal with that maybe I couldn't have before. It was an interesting form, I felt like, of therapy. And I've done therapy. It didn't really work for me. Again, not just as a kid, but later in life, I did end up just doing talk therapy. And for me, it just wasn't it. But the emotion code is based on the idea that as humans, we're like sponges. And as sponges, we hold on to things like emotions.
Yeah.
And they say maybe on average like 300 emotions. I think the book says that. But some of these emotions can be negative. And these negative emotions can be causing us emotional harm, physical harm, all sorts of different types of negative things from these negative emotions that are trapped. The idea of the emotion code is through muscle testing. You identify which emotions are trapped and where, and you can go even further. My person was very spiritual, and so she went further and figured out what age and what memories, and then you just muscle test to confirm. And I was someone that could muscle test. Not everyone can. I've been muscle tested by chiropractors for like food allergies, for example.
Yeah.
I've gotten blood tests done. Through muscle testing, they could guess each one of my food allergy to a T. They didn't get one wrong. It was crazy. So, you identify it and then you just release it. It's a lot of it is just like pronouncing that it's released, but then they do say, we're energy, we're balls of energy. And so they just do this little magnet thing where they kind of swipe you and it just helps drain it, whatever. And then, after that, you're kind of drained for 72 hours or so, because it's like releasing, doing its thing. I don't know. I did it like maybe 4 times, and now I do it to myself because I think it's a great tool to just listen to your body that your mind might not be hearing. So in these sessions, I had a lot of childhood memories come up, especially with my mother and with the church. So my brother's 5 years older. I went through watching him basically like disown our family when I was still in high school, and I didn't understand why. He went through major mental health challenges. I didn't understand why. Again, we were 4.0 students. We graduate. He double majored in like some sciencey thing.
Wow.
I don't know. He's very smart, and
I'm not surprised.
and we just were successful, and that's just like, why wouldn't you be happy if you're successful? And I never knew why. So I remember like talking to him about it, and we're not close. Like still to this day, we're not that close because we have like something weird in our family. And I remember talking to him one day. I was like, hey, I had some memories, XYZ. Do you remember these? And he's like, let me tell you, this is what I remember. And we talked about it. We had these shared experiences, and one of them, and again, you have to think of trauma. Trauma is relative, and it's the person experiencing trauma, they're going to perceive it as, oh my gosh, this was traumatic. Just as if my mentor who had, a crazy story, way more traumatic.
In your opinion.
In my opinion, right? But as a human experiencing it, you can't compare.
You cannot.
Especially with children. And so our childlike minds, right, they're still developing. We're conditioned in a certain way to be very, very anxious because we were constantly in fear of our parents not loving us, going to hell because the church says so. The church basically told my parents, at least that's what they tell me, that they decided Harry Potter, Pokemon cards, things like that were evil. So instead of just getting them taken away or giving them away, we had to go outside to our fire pit and watch them burn. And I was like, I remember I was crying because my brother was crying because he loved those. And that was like how he bonded with his neighbor kids. And we were just all crying. It was just very, I don't know.
It's traumatic.
It was traumatic because we just, and that little thing, that was just one event I can remember. Again, I was very foggy growing up, but I do remember that things like that would happen all the time. I remember when I was 9 and we would grow up going trick-or-treating all the time. My mom would make my Halloween costumes.
Yeah.
Like we would all go out with the neighbor kids and super fun. One day, one Halloween, they were like, you are never going to be allowed to celebrate Halloween in any capacity again, including in schools. I would skip school for these things. And instead of trick-or-treating on Halloween, we would have to watch a documentary on the true meaning of Halloween, which was paganism. I learned about animal sacrifices and human sacrifices.
My God.
And I was 9. So now all of a sudden Halloween was taken away. So a lot of stuff like that. So obviously there's like some religious indoctrination abuse going on where they had their best intentions, and I love my parents.
Sure.
They did the best that they could do with the information they were given. And unfortunately at that time, and we have been multiple religions. My dad grew up Catholic, my mom grew up Methodist. I think we were Methodist to start. We went to multiple different denominations because they are very smart people. They're scholars. They're always looking for what they believe is right.
Yeah.
And so that's where their hearts were coming from. And so I have a lot of grace for that because they did their best. But they've cried to us to this day, and they know, like, they've financially abused us. They've raised us in conditional love. They were overly strict, which is so silly. Like, I feel like that sounds like I'm playing victim, but unfortunately my mother projected her own criticisms, her own people-pleasing problems, her own perfectionist problems onto me, her little girl.
Yeah.
And so that's what we did. We excelled in sports. We excelled in school. We had to be perfect. And that's why I think I was so scared to be imperfect. And that's why it caused me so much stress, which resulted in anxiety, which my anxiety resulted in depression.
Wow.
And I just didn't know because I knew they had best intentions. And so I just didn't know better. I didn't know that I was like mentally ill because I wasn't supposed to be.
No.
And I go to church here and there. I've gone to different things here and there because I'm open-minded enough. My parents now believe in a lot different things now, which has helped our relationship. So where they don't really do organized church anymore, that could be trauma from raising us.
Sure. Yeah.
I kind of feel the same way, but there's lots of reasons why. I remember there was like Wizards of Waverly Place on Disney Channel. They ended up getting rid of our TV altogether. We had no social media until very late in life.
What about music?
No secular music. Oh my gosh. I didn't listen. I remember the only reason why I could listen to secular music, I think that's what they call it.
Secular, yes.
Yep. It was because I was on a swim team and we would practice before a meet. There was practice time, like maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours, where you kind of jump in the pool, you do your warm up with your team. All the other teams are in there and they would play music in the background. And I remember there was one swim meet and Firework by Katy Perry was on. And I was like, Mom, can I get this on my iPod? It's a good song. And she was Christian. She's like, nope, Katy Perry left the church. If you listen, even if it's a good song, you're supporting someone who left the church, and that's wrong. And because her father was like a pastor or something.
So, yes.
So that we always had to go back to the core of what are we really supporting? And so I couldn't even listen to Firework by Katy Perry.
Oh my gosh.
For a long time. They eased up on me. My brother had it way worse. I've talked to my brother literally a few months ago for Thanksgiving. I visited him and he's married. He considers himself an atheist now, probably because of trauma. And to me, I'm like, believe what you want to believe. But I also could see how that's a trauma response because we were so strictly religious.
Yeah.
And he had it worse. But he's like, how can you believe our parents have changed when it's really only been, I'm almost 27. So what? 4 to 5 years, when like the first couple decades of our lives, they were one way and what they've suddenly changed. And I'm like, people change, but to us, it's really hard to see it. So we have definitely barriers we're going to have to go through in our adult lives. And I think we're all aware of it, whether we talk about it, and we will talk about it in bits and pieces, but we're not a normal family, which is really sad because we're normal people, I think, individually, and we love our friends. I'm a very friend-based person. I think my brother's the same.
Yeah.
He got really close with his wife's family, and at that Thanksgiving little meetup that we did, he was like, my wife's family is my family, and I like our parents, but I don't love them because of everything that's happened. And I cried. I was like, I get it. I am so sorry. And, again, it's just stepping stones of healing, and eventually we'll get there. And it's not going to just be immediate. But I think in the last 5 years of my healing journey, between mental health, between physical health, starting to work out, actually feeding myself, actually being, nutrient minded, realizing what's healthy and what's not healthy has shaped my life so that long term I will be successful, but in a way where there's not that like conditional, critical, you have to be perfect. I'm doing it for me to feel good, not because I'm trying to impress anyone else.
Was it difficult for you? Because I feel like because of the situation that you were in, that it would be easy for you to become the hypercritical perfectionist.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Like,
yes.
how have you kind of figured that out about yourself? Have you kind of stepped away from that? Like, how have you worked through that?
That is a very good question. So, unfortunately for me, I'm very, very similar to my mother. My dad just did whatever my mom kind of did and said. So I always say my mother, but it was them as a unit. My father they're been together for like 33 years. They're amazing as a couple. He is always in support of her. Like that's his number one.
Yeah.
But again, it really was projected from my mother. And so I would say where it comes out in me, and I didn't know this, this has probably been a year. I've realized in the last year, which sucks because I feel like that's a little delayed. You're
still going to keep figuring out.
I am still going to be figuring out stuff. It comes out in relationships, friendships, and my especially significant others. So in my significant others, I would say that's when I'm my worst. I have never been in a secure relationship because I'm anxiously attached because of being raised in conditional love, because I'm so scared they're going to leave me. And I am a very confident, very secure person on my own.
Clearly.
But the minute I get into anything, which is why I'm not in anything and I haven't been seeking anything because I have to figure it out, is because I literally get so anxious again. And it's not chronic. It's not like what I was growing up.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my gosh, they're going to leave me. Oh my gosh, they're talking to other girls.
Is that
like
your attachment style?
That's my attachment style. And I have not realized that until the last year. And I have had a few relationships and they've failed. And I think I've blamed them for a couple of things. Like, yes, they've done things wrong. At the core of it, I was definitely the issue. And I feel so bad for them dealing with me, honestly, when I'm not my healthiest self. And I knew in the back of my head, I'm like, this is probably not normal. So I have to figure that part. That's probably my next step of healing.
Yeah.
Is like, why? I mean, I know why. And that's, I feel like half of it right there. It's because of my relationship with my mother growing up. And that's why I have an anxious attachment style. And so that's where it comes out. And I can be critical. I have high expectations of myself still. It's definitely eased up, but I have high expectations of others. And so when it comes to friendships, I love hard and I love all the way because I never received that love.
Yeah.
And now I know how to give it. And so I'm going to give it to everybody.
Yeah.
And that is a mistake. You cannot give your love
dangerous.
to everybody.
Yeah.
And so I have unfortunately picked wrong friends. I have gone through some friends and I've had lifelong friends. I have had the mix. I think everyone has. But I have noticed my patterns of like going all in, giving them all my love and expecting it in return.
Yes.
Because that's what my parents kind of did in a way.
Yeah.
And so that's another thing I am like I can feel betrayed easily because I'm a very loyal person. I expect straight up loyalty. Like I would never do that to you, so why would you do that to me?
Right.
And be so hurt. And I'm also very forgiving because again and so then it becomes a cycle. So that's why I ended up friends with the wrong people because it's like, well, it's fine. I'm loyal to you. I'll just forgive you. It's fine. Let's keep going. And then it happens again. Oh, I'm hurt by that. And I've set boundaries. Yeah, you're not listening, but it's fine. I'll just keep forgiving you. Same with relationships because I'm so scared of people leaving me. And it's come to a point where in my adult life, I can finally identify why I was anxious, what my trauma, because I think everyone does have. I've met one person that has had no trauma.
I don't believe it.
And I don't believe it.
I don't believe it.
But I have to say, it was my ex-boyfriend. Great human. Still, I think he's fantastic. Nothing bad ever happened. It just wasn't the fit. Yeah. And I remember I would have waves of like anxiety or waves of whatever it was. Because again, anxious attachment. And he just wouldn't get it. He's like, I don't understand. I remember one of our friends had a depressive episode. He witnessed it. And he's like, is this how you feel sometimes? And I was like, yeah, a lot of people feel this way sometimes. And he's like, I've never experienced that. I don't know how he couldn't relate. And so looking at the positives of what trauma can bring, it's like one, if you can overcome, which I believe everyone can, you have a healing journey that can inspire others, that can hopefully heal themselves.
Yep.
And then 2, I do think it creates a sense of depth, of relatability, of conversation like this.
Yes.
So I think there's a lot of positives. And I think I've reframed my whole life after being in a hole of anxiety and depression to be positive. Like everything happens for a reason. Everything's meant to be. There's no reason to stress. I think everything is already figured out for us. And we just have to live it. And this is just a whole journey of figuring out emotions and healing our inner child.
Yeah. And that's why we have the survivor's voice, is that anybody that's listening can have the opportunity to be inspired by people's stories. They can grow from it. They can find hope from it. They can get encouraged by it. Like
Totally.
They can get resources and tools from it. Like, oh my
Exactly.
God, like, what did she say? I'm going to go check that out.
And I think that's a part of my journey too, is to be able to share to others, because even if one person, which I already know I already know I've affected people because of my story.
Yeah.
Working in mental health care. I remember I became well at the neurofeedback, and then I started working at the TMS place. And I feel like my superpower there was like my power of joy. I was so joyful because I was on this high of like, I just healed my anxiety. You can do it too.
Yes.
And then they would be so inspired. And these people, they always say like they come in as the depressed of the depressed, because this is like last resort. It's for insurance to cover it, right? We went into that.
Yes.
And so I would have people come in and, be crying, be saying things that they didn't mean, but they felt in the moment. And within their program, which at that time, it was a 7-week program, I would see them every single day, 5 days a week. This was during COVID too.
Wow.
So sometimes I'm the only person that they're seeing. And I just felt like I thrived in that job because I had anxiety too.
Yeah.
And because I healed and I gave hope.
Yes.
And it was so powerful. And again, that's why I actually left the field, because I loved it so much that I didn't ever want to burn out. And I didn't ever want to take away from my experience of just so much joy and watching people literally heal from the tools that I healed from too. So
I love that.
Fun.
Oh my God.
Looking back at my story and looking at it even deeper, I think a core of it, and I think a lot of generations deal with, is generational trauma. And so my family history on my mom's side specifically, because I know a lot more about her side rather than my dad's side, because I think my dad's side was pretty solid. My dad's a pretty solid guy. I think he was okay.
Yeah.
My mom, though, was not, and her mom and dad, not at all. They had very traumatic childhoods. Not my mom specifically. She had her own things, but my grandparents.
Okay.
And because their parents were so awful and blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to go into their story. And so I think that's why my grandparents were the way that they were, and why my mom was the way that they were, and why I am the way that I am. And at a certain point, you have to stop it.
Yes.
And it can be up to you.
Totally.
And that's what I did. I'm like, there is generational trauma in my family, and I'm done. I'm not going to have my kids, which is why I'm not in a relationship too, because I'm not ready to have kids. I'm not ready to do that because I'm not done healing our family's generational trauma. You can do it. And it's just having the mindset of trying everything, being so open-minded, and being willing to have hard conversations with your family members if that's what it takes. And sometimes it means cutting them out. I don't think you have to always like have a great bond with your parents if your parents were your abusers type of thing. Like my brother, he's like, I like them, but I don't love them.
Which is smart.
Which is okay if that's protecting your peace.
Yeah.
But that can also be a sign that you're not finding inner healing. So it all is a journey. And again, I think it just is really up to us to take control of how we can do whatever we want in our lives. I really believe that. I think there are 0 limits.
I agree.
And that includes healing.
Yes.
No matter what traumatic experience.
I 100% agree. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. I always grow from anybody that we interview. I'm just like, oh my God, I learn and I grow, and it's the best thing. I feel like I'm like receiving so much goodness on this end. So
I'm so glad.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
So if you guys have anything that you'd like to say, like, please drop us a comment if you've experienced anything similar. So drop a comment. Tell us what your thoughts were on this episode. Give us a like, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell. Safe Harbor is dedicated to helping survivors of trauma find healing and restoration through support, resources, and community. They provide hope for those affected by human trafficking. Visit safeharborforfreedom.com to learn more or support their mission today. Thank you so much, Safe Harbor, for supporting the survivor's voice. Next week on The Survivor's Voice,
I don't even know how much time passed. And then I see him come out and like my whole body, like, your stomach's in your throat. You feel tight. You start shaking. She went to the hospital. She said her arm was numb, and that was the felony hanging over my head.
Thank you for joining us on The Survivor's Voice. I'm Angie Sedore, reminding you that every survivor's story matters, including yours. If you or someone you know has a story to share, you can contact us at booking@thesurvivorsvoice.net. Your voice deserves to be heard. If you enjoy the survival stories we share, we would love it if you gave this channel a follow and a 5-star rating. No matter how dark the journey, the light of resilience shines brighter. Thank you for listening. If you know someone who would benefit from hearing this story of survival, please share this powerful testimony with them. A heartfelt thank you to our incredible listeners for your unwavering support, and to the survivor community for your courage and resilience. You are the heart of this podcast. Special thanks to our producer and editor, Christina Elder, and to Dan Wise with Wise Media Studios for bringing these powerful stories to life. Your dedication makes the survivor's voice possible.